Medhurst, and I'm an accredited journalist from the United Kingdom. I became the first journalist in Britain to be arrested under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act of 2000. When I flew into Heathrow, 6 police officers came to meet me at the entrance of the aircraft. They were mostly in plain clothes, no ID, not that I can remember anyway. And all of my journalistic equipment was seized, microphones, wired, wireless, headphones, you name it. And I was placed in solitary confinement, held for up to 24 hours, almost 24 hours, and incommunicado, so I was not allowed to speak to family. I was explicitly told you're not allowed to speak to them. And I could only speak to a lawyer after they had contacted a lawyer, which, you know, in that moment for a couple of hours did not seem very certain, given that they were accusing me of something so big. And, you know, the conditions were just atrocious. I mean, you could liken it to a dungeon. It's like a toilet, basically. There's, you know, no natural light, no windows. It smells like urine. You're held in there. You know, it's very dehumanizing as an experience. And I think that was kind of the purpose of it, especially to kind of, you know, rattle journalists and then know that other journalists are going to be listening to that and you know, might prefer to stay silent about what's happening. There was also a camera filming, a microphone recording, 24/7 the whole time, you know, while you're going to the toilet, while you're eating, while you're sleeping. So this is what happens in the UK, just so we're very clear. And the bed is essentially a raised slab of concrete. Okay, so that was like a paper-thin mattress. As far as I recall, the police didn't even tell me that I could have a lawyer until I brought it up. I don't know if that was, you know, why that is, but that, to the best of my recollection, that's what happened. And you know, my right to privacy was also violated in several ways, because not only because of those conditions, but also what Craig was talking about with having your phone seized. You know, I also have a duty towards sources, you know, information that I wish to keep confidential. So, you know, there are multiple issues going on here that simply are intended to have a chilling effect on other journalists elsewhere. And, you know, it is shocking behavior from any country, especially one that calls itself a democracy and then lectures other countries about democracy. So, you know, again, just so we're clear, this is the UK in 2024. You know, the police did give me back my passport. They did release me on unconditional bail, which is great. But as a journalist, some legal experts have reasoned that perhaps you know, that was on purpose, because now I'm effectively in limbo. I don't know what I can and cannot say. I'm afraid to, you know, do my job normally, and I'm impeded from working freely. So, to be clear, I'm under investigation. I could be charged, and I could go to prison for up to 14 years for doing my job. So that is what you know, how bad it is. And the National Union of Journalists, which is the largest union in Britain, as well as the International Federation of Journalists, which regroups all unions around the world for the press. Both of them issued statements condemning my arrest at the highest level from the Secretary Generals themselves. Organizations, NGOs like Code Paying, Stop the War, and many others, including Justice pour tous, they've had my back, which is appreciated. But, you know, by using this legislation, the Terrorism Act specifically, you know, it's rather a misuse than a use, because the legislation itself is so expansive, it's so broad and vague, particularly when it comes to Section 12. It's done in a way that it can criminalize free speech, and it can be easily abused by the state to, you know, make reporting about actions regarding groups on the ground, you know, even if it's in line with international law and domestic law, suddenly criminal. And by misusing this counter-terror legislation against me, the UK is not only violating my right to freedom of expression and to free speech, but it's also violating the public's right to be informed, okay? Because that is my duty, and my mandate is towards the public. It's to tell them what is happening. It's to tell them the news. It's to report honestly and accurately. So these are all things you will find enshrined inside the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Other rights that are both, international and also domestic in the UK that are normally guaranteed, like, for example, the right to make a phone call when you're held, or to contact a lawyer, to remain silent during interrogations. Not specific to me, but in general, these things can also be just randomly waived. I even asked one of the police officers, like, you're telling me I have the right to tell someone, and then when I want to, you say I can't. What kind of a right is it? And they says, well, it's not absolute, it can be waived. This is very shocking behavior, and the fact is that the United Kingdom is systematically misusing the Terrorism Act as a means to abuse our right to free speech and our right to be informed, and for my right to inform the public about a genocide that is happening right now. I don't feel it's a coincidence that people like myself and people like Craig, who reported on Julian Assange's case inside the court, are being targeted by this legislation. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I don't think it's a coincidence that people who talk about what's happening in Palestine are being targeted by the British government with the Terrorism Act. And Craig already gave a list of colleagues that have been. So, this is really unacceptable behavior, and it is an escalation by the government, because following my arrest, they used the same thing, Section 12, to go after activists, like Sarah Wilkinson and then Palestine Action, in the span of a week or 2 weeks. So it's very intentional, it's very clear, the message has been sent. And not only does the government in London have the nerve to participate in war crimes and in acts of terrorism in Gaza, but it then has, the nerve to call us the terrorists and to try and silence us because we're saying, please don't chop Palestinian children into 16 pieces. Keir Starmer is a former human rights lawyer. Okay, I think that's very important to point out. And he said that Israel has the right to cut off water, to cut off electricity to Palestinians. I question his qualifications as a human rights lawyer, and I don't think that he understands how angry people are in the West about what is happening. And so now the government's response is to simply lash out against us for telling the truth. What the British government is doing is terrorism in the very literal sense of it. This is not a political chant or something that I'm leveling. It is an objective fact. They are literally murdering massive quantities of civilians in three-dimensional space, and that's terrorism if I've ever seen it. And I'd just like to highlight the absurdity of this all. Craig, as you know, is a former British ambassador. My parents did not work for the FCDO, but they did serve as diplomats in the UN. They received Nobel Peace Prizes for their work as UN peacekeepers. And my father even authored a training manual on counter-terrorism for the UN. He was the Deputy Chief of Security here in Geneva and in Vienna. So, if we are being arrested as so-called terrorists, how many do you think have come through London Heathrow or other ports in Britain and been also arrested or detained as so-called terrorists, but simply did not have the platforms or the opportunities afforded to them in order to address the public and inform them? So let me just finish by asking the British government a question. Is this what you want to be known for around the world? Is this what you want your legacy to be? How many more of us are you going to arrest? And how many more Palestinians are you going to murder?